For people who watch my channel, it's safe to say that I like a lot of stuff, and I like talking about that stuff. And while I don't tend to stick to one kind of topic, I'm nothing if not consistent with it. Oh, and if you're new here, feel free to do the thing. You know the one. Wait, not! As someone who spends most of his time pursuing the arts, I'm no stranger to working on projects at any given hour. And while I used to be able to start a project and work on it for 10 hours straight, since turning 24 I soon discovered that this mortal form has its limitations. I've officially reached Unc status. I won't try to say it's a good thing working for that long, no breaks, but it's definitely bad for your health. But in my case, while it's probably absolutely ruined my sleeping habits, I did at least get some time to enjoy some things for longer than I was able to before. One of those things being music, of course. I'd pretty much listen to it while working on projects all the time, but what I soon found was a need to explore further into some of the discographies of artists I enjoy. Thus this month's video. Before we delve into it, I do have to give a bit of a heads up though. In this video, I'll be talking about a few concept albums. Now, some of you might have just rolled your eyes because usually when someone mentions concept albums, they might come off as an elitist musical snob, often dismissing everyone else's taste. I, however, promise that this is not the intention behind this video, so to avoid fighting amongst the musical connoisseurs, the albums I'll be mentioning today aren't really obscure, but they're not exactly topping today's charts anytime soon either. These are just my personal favorites. Starting us off, we have Clancy, the most recent release by duo 21 Pilots. Yes, it's because of recency bias. I've been a long time fan and haven't missed an album of theirs. I was right there in the trenches when, well, Trench dropped. What an experience watching the fanbase collectively go detective mode trying to figure this out, by the way. Okay, I said I never missed an album, and that's true for the most part. Except for one, the Scaled and Icy album. For whatever reason, I got too wrapped up in other things to really notice at the time, and I'll admit the songs on the album didn't quite hit for me. That is of course until it grew on me, but that's a story for another time. So there I was, June of 2024. I was feeling a bit lost this year, I won't lie. I wasn't really in the creative spirit thanks to a few setbacks. But then I heard Backslide for the first time. That little spark inside of me grew into a flame once more after hearing that they were so back, baby. What made this album hit me so hard was how fresh it sounded, but somehow had the same classic 21 Pilots feel. Which is probably why I didn't really like Scaled and Icy as much. It felt almost disconnected from everything they'd been building before. And then I later realized that that was the whole point of the album, but that's a story for another time. Clancy is meant to be the final part of the story that takes place in the mind of Tyler Joseph. The story that had been carefully laid out over the years. While Clancy isn't my all-time favorite 21 Pilots album, it is still ranked high for me. Shout out to Versa. If you never looked into 21 Pilots but love concept albums and storytelling, I definitely recommend them. Clancy feels familiar, and yet unknown at the same time. For a lot of fans, including myself, it felt like returning to your hometown long after everyone's left, and everything looks different. I first got into them when I was around 16, so coming back as a 24-year-old, it felt like the music had matured with me, all while still being unsure about everything. This point drives home, especially in songs like Oldie Station and Midwest Indigo. Definitely a great album, and I highly recommend you go at least listen to it. Alright, so this one is not what you'd call a concept album, but I still really enjoy this one. Picture this, it's 2021 and I decide to hop back onto GTA Online for whatever reason, when I hear the Strokes on this new radio station. So naturally this station became my favorite station, while I'd listen to it during my yearly drive across Los Santos. And that's when I heard it, Mac DeMarco's On the Level. That inevitably sent me down the rabbit hole, and I was pleasantly surprised by just how immaculate the vibes were. Now don't get me wrong, I love this old dog, but Salad Days just gets me, you know? I generally like to find out more about how many of my favorite things came to be, and the story behind Salad Days, and well, Mac in general, was such a treat to learn. Normally I'd say this sort of thing doesn't matter, but this entire album was recorded in his bedroom on analog equipment, which means there was a lot of creative decisions that went into engineering this, and many other albums of his. Salad Days is fun and chilled and unironically deep in a lot of senses. Just go listen to the words of Salad Days. I mean, damn. This record has the many advantages of being home recorded on analog equipment. There's very little room for error, so when something does slip up, you'll always find one of those unique little moments inside the song that you would have never guessed was because of a mistake. I absolutely eat up albums like this, and if you're in a more chilled out, nostalgic mood and looking for something fresh, I definitely recommend you give this album a listen. Haha! I have switched it up on you with an electronic album. Another musical duo I found myself bopping to was Daft Punk. I'd always hear one or two of their songs in passing and never really paid close enough attention until one day I got curious. When I was a lot younger, I didn't really respect electronic music because I didn't think it took any skill to write, and boy was I wrong. It's through this album that I learned that you could do so much more than just pressing a button. And while Daft Punk wasn't exactly known for their lyrical content, they certainly know how to get a crowd moving. But not just that, they could also write scores likened to symphonies, and that is not an easy feat. You of course have legendary albums like Discovery and Homework, and you can't forget the classic Random Access Memories. So why then choose this album over those, especially Discovery, which if anything is the concept album by Daft Punk? Well, for me it is simply because this film score, along with a few other tracks from the Tron Legacy movie, acted as a gateway into electronic music for me. So if you like film scores and are in the mood for some incredible electronic soundscapes, this one comes highly recommended. Before we go further, I know this is their most popular album, but I just wanted to mention it anyway. I was so torn between either this one, Danger Days, or even Unconventional Weapons. Believe me, I know, they have so many great albums to choose from. So why the Black Parade specifically? Well, like most, it was from this album and the hit song that I was first introduced to the band. However, surprisingly, I wasn't really a big MyChem fan back in its prime, but seeing as I was only 8 years old, you could probably tell why I didn't really get it at first. It wasn't until I turned 19 that I decided to give them a shot, and it turns out I was a MyChem fan. This album is good whether you're jamming to it in the car with your friends, or you're just staying up way too late working on an art piece that could have absolutely waited until morning. This album feels like celebrating at the end of the world at its high points, and it feels like mourning a loved one in its low points, making for a very versatile experience. I should point out, however, that this band isn't for everyone, and I get that. I should also mention that where 21 Pilots had a continuous story spanning over their discography, MyChem's albums kind of stand as their own separate stories. I guess you could say the pattern here is that I typically enjoy these albums for the creative minds behind them. Both Gerard Way and Tyler Joseph are really good at building these amazing worlds through their art. It's funny how hard the song Sleep hits when you're actually working at 3 a.m. on whatever this is. These albums are just a few that I remember distinctly going back to, and when the mood hits, I'll straight up just go and listen through them again and again because I think they're neat. You of course are entitled to your opinions, however, so I totally agree if you don't think any of these are great. But do keep in mind, I am not a review channel. I'm just a guy who likes stuff sometimes. But I digress. I have so many albums I would love to talk about sometime, so if you like this video, be sure to let me know by interacting down below. And until next time friends, remember to take a second to appreciate the little things in life.